uninspiring. So,
Okay.
fair warning for tonight's class. We are into a zone of chapter 3 that does not have the most inspirational of Mishnayot, but they are very important. One of the reasons, to just follow up from our pre-class conversation before the recording got going, one of the reasons why differences in philosophy became more important than differences in legal interpretation is because the realm in which we can act as a legal interpreter got smaller and smaller since the Enlightenment. I have to confess, no congregants have ever come to me with questions about, I left my money with so-and-so, and now it's gone. What do we do? No one comes to me with those questions anymore. No one goes to hardly any rabbi with those kinds of questions. They will go to a civil court if they need those sorts of questions answered. And as such, practical Jewish rulings became less important than philosophical positions. And as such, the movements have argued more about philosophy than practical halakha, because that's where they put their flag. And that's because that's the only piece of land left for our flag, our ideas, and then our ritual laws. Law has been taken over by the secular authorities.
No, that's because maybe no one comes to see you with the question, because everyone sees that you don't have the authority to implement the decision. So they need to go to the civil right.
Technically, I do. If two people came to me for arbitration, and they agreed that I could be their mediator, and they both agreed that in the advance, then yes, they could. You can have anybody be your arbitrator if both parties agree to that person's authority. So technically people could. And indeed, my rabbi growing up, Rabbi Aaron Kopikas, he was originally from Argentina, and then he served in Mexico for many years, and then moved across to San Diego. Many of the Latin members of his congregation still did go to him if they had questions that they needed, business arrangements between other Latin American congregants. They would still go to him for those answers because they didn't want to go to the American courts. They'd rather go for the Jewish answer. But that has almost all disappeared. And part of that was a holdover because they felt that the courts in other parts of the world weren't as reliable for Jewish people. And so you were better off going to your rabbi than you were going to a court in some country who you didn't trust all of the justice. So with that as our disclaimer for today's Mishnah, let's see what we're talking about. So we are in chapter 3 of the Mishnah, and we are in Mishnah 4. If you're looking in the USCJ handout, it's the one that says 4 and 5 on one page. Looks like that. I know the one thing about this particular version of the Mishnah, in this printout they did, it doesn't have the chapter on each page. So here, if you want me to help you find it.
Yes, please.
Yeah, I think you're a little far in. So Mishnah chapter 2. And bada bing, bada boom.
Oh, wow, that was good. Wow.
Okay. So can I take it then by your enthusiasm to find the right page that you were volunteering to read? Okay, we all on the same page? Yes, yes. Take it away.
Mishnah 4.
Right.
2 men deposited money with a third. The one 100 zuz, and the other 200 zuz.
All right, so just a reminder, we're dealing mostly in this part of chapter 3 with people who are guardians, who are looking after someone else's stuff. And so now we're dealing with the case where one guy gave the guy 100 zuzim to look after, and the other guy gave him 200 zuzim to look after.
Afterwards, one claimed he deposited 200 zuzim, and the other claimed he deposited 200 zuzim.
What's the problem?
There's only 300 total.
Okay, there's only 300 zuz that have been in the deposit, and they both say that he deposited 200. Now, it could be a lie, it could be a mistake, but we now have a conflict of what's been looked after.
Well, what he does is he gives this one 100 zuzim, this one 100 zuzim, and the rest remains until Elijah comes.
Okay. Sound like an answer? Right. Each get 100 from the 300 that are there. So that means there's 100 left over, and since we don't know who has it, and again, this is assuming bad record keeping, and there's no proof of who has what, no witnesses of who has what. Obviously, all of that would change the story. Aside, and when Elijah comes, he'll answer the question. You didn't know that that's what you were waiting for when we have Elijah to the Seder? I'm not actually joking. The idea that when Elijah comes, he will answer all of the kushiyot, the difficult questions, goes all the way back to the Talmud. The reason why we call that fifth cup Elijah's cup is not because we are inviting him to drink it. It is because we are inviting him to answer the question of whether we should drink it. 4 or 5 cups, right? Because there are 5 verbs of redemption that are used in the Torah for the Exodus, but the 5th verb has to do with being brought into the land of Israel, and therefore we're not sure whether on Pesach we only drink for the first 4, which have to do with getting out of Egypt, or whether we should also be drinking the 5th because of the promise of Israel. And so that 5th cup, we pour, and we wait for an answer. And so far each year we haven't had an answer.
Not yet.
So we leave the cup there. So that's Elijah's cup, not because he's going to drink it, but because he'll tell us whether we should drink it. So he'll answer our questions. So that's our solution here. Is that another knock?
I'll go look at it.
I don't think so. Maybe not.
No.
Well, we'll see. If a face comes up to the door or a window.
There's a little boy out there, and maybe his.
Right. They're doing stuff in the gift shop. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. But Rabbi Yossi's going to have a rebuttal because the rest of you took this way too easy.
So if that's the case, they each get 100 zuzim. What does the deceiver, what does the liar lose? Rather, the whole is left until Elijah comes.
All right. So through the logic, if one of them deposited 100, one 200. Back in our first version, the guy who lied didn't lose anything. The only person who's lost anything is the poor guy who was honest.
Yeah.
So how is that fair?
Yeah.
Better, all of it is kept.
Oh, the whole.
No one gets
Nobody
nothing.
gets anything.
So it's worse for the guy.
Okay, so it's worse for the guy who was honest because now rather than getting half of what he deposited, he gets 0.
The 200.
And it's also worse for the deceiver because he doesn't get back his 100 either. So what does that imply then for what you would do next time?
So there are a lot of pressure for them to try to find a solution before.
No, next time tell the truth because you're going to lose 100 zuz.
Exactly. There's no incentive to lie.
Tell the truth.
Right. So have documentation, have witnesses to the deposits, have proper record keeping, and don't lie because lying is not going to get you anything, and it's just going to hurt you and the other guy. Right. So the basic principle here is you shouldn't be rewarded for lying. You shouldn't be rewarded. But there's a problem, which is I still can't give the money because I was entrusted with it by these 2 people, and I can't give it to the wrong person, or else I am failing to live up to my duty as the guardian of this cash.
Well, meanwhile, you're hanging on to 300 zuzim.
But you can't use it. That's what he means by right.
Watch it. You're responsible for it.
Exactly. You are going to hold on to this, and your family will hold on to it until Elijah comes.
So what happens if you decide to hold it in our modern institutional bank?
Mm-hmm.
Who keep the interest?
The interest would be divided according to the ratio of the original deposit.
Right.
When Elijah will come?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, trust me, when Elijah gets here, we're going to sit him down, and he's going to have so many questions to answer. It's so good you're coming. The Messiah is coming soon. Now, here, let me ask you about this.
So we need to sit with him and to the bank and say, hey, you know what? I have this amount of money. Keep. What is your longest term?
So yeah, that's the way they resolve it.
So which opinion was?
Rabbi Yossi's opinion is held. Yes.
The
the deceiver should not be able to get back his minimum. Yeah.
So nobody gets anything back.
Nobody gets anything until Elijah comes. There should be no a deceiver can gain from this, can benefit from this.
That's unusual because in general,
yes,
the last opinion usually is the loser one. They don't give them the majority opinion for the last one.
Correct. It's not the typical way to follow the decision of the Mishnah. But in this case, the logic is impeccable and is followed as the deciding opinion. And so too, we're going to see in Mishnah 5. That's why these 2 are on the same page.
Right, Mishnah 5. So too, 2 men deposited vessels with a third. One vessel worth 100 zuzim, the other worth 1,000 zuzim.
So please take care of my Ming vase.
Yes, right. Afterwards, one claimed that the valuable one was his, and the other one claimed that the valuable one was his.
Right? So now it's not cash. You can't divide it easily. And both of them are claiming the Ming vase rather than the other vase.
So, okay, one answer is he gives the less valuable one to one of them, and from the value of the more valuable one, he gives the value of the lesser one. He gives 100 zuz. One guy gets the vessel, the other guy gets 100 zuz, which is the value of the lesser vessel, and the rest remains until Elijah comes.
Exactly. So you find a way to turn the other one into cash, and then you save it until you get Elijah showing up and telling you the answer.
So they each get the same amount back, regardless.
They each get the same minimum. Right? Again, so the opinion of the first, of what's called the Resha, the beginning of the Mishnah, everybody had at least 100 zuzim in this pot, right? Everybody has at least that much. So everybody should at least walk away with that much, because that we can guarantee belongs to each person. But you can't really guarantee who got what, so you save the rest. And the rebuttal from Rabbi Yossi is, again,
if you do that, what does the deceiver lose? Rather, the whole thing is left until Elijah comes.
Right. Otherwise, he is at least getting neutral. He is at least, benefiting by not having any penalty, whereas the other guy has lost, in this case, 900 zuzim. And the vase, which may have more value to him than just the cash. So you just are stuck. So better documentation, better witnessing, better record keeping, and have in place a position that will not reward someone. So if somebody lies to the point that it becomes unclear who actually owns what, and that way no one has an incentive to lie. Make sense?
So again, Rabbi Yossi.
Yes, in the same way, yes. But they needed both, because it had to be not just for cash, which is easily divisible, but for objects which are not so easily divisible.
So the guy who lied,
right,
and then comes back and says, "Okay, I lied. Give me 100. Give me my 100."
Right. And the 1,000 belongs to the other, or the 200 belongs to the other guy.
Exactly. So isn't he subject to any
punishment,
punishment for lying and attempted theft?
There isn't punishment in that particular sense, but there is social punishment.
Yeah.
Right. So somebody who is a known deceiver, somebody who has been exposed as a liar when it comes to contracts and deals like this in particular, people don't do business with them anymore. And your word is your bond was very, very important, really up until this country, up until very recently. My wonderful professor, Rabbi Elliot Dorff, really one of the giants of the conservative movement, when he was teaching us halakha, he talked about the importance of your word being your bond. His father was in construction, and he went and would buy, thousands of dollars worth of materials to be ordered and delivered. And so he would go to the person, and they would talk about what needed to be delivered, and they say, "How much is it?" And it's like, $4,000. They shake hands, and he'd leave. Elliot Dorff, before he's rabbi, says to his father, "But don't you need a contract, or the list or something?" He's like, "What's a piece of paper going to do for me if he decides to cheat? Right? It's my business will be in trouble. So I pick people I can trust that I do business with, right? Because the piece of paper is no protection for me. Because I don't want him to be penalized. I don't want it to be made up. I want the project to work. And so I need to do business with people I know I can trust. And the piece of paper is not going to make me trust anyone more. If it gets to the courts, I've already lost." So, and I think, it's a very real and a very powerful statement about what a community should be built around, which is that feeling of trust. And you only end up in the court when you've got something that's gone seriously wrong. Unfortunately, we can take our own decisions about how seriously wrong our litigious society has gotten.
Because otherwise, people have genuine differences of opinion that should go to court.
Of course.
Not when one is a liar, but there are reasons for courts, because there are genuine differences.
Absolutely.
Where they see the same thing differently, and you get a third opinion to.
Right. If one guy says, "No, I'm sure that what we agreed upon was A," and the other guy says, "No, I'm sure it was B,"
right,
then you need to go to court. Or if one guy says what we agreed upon was covered, says, "No, it wasn't covered by this," you need to go to court to reconcile that. But For basic, run-of-the-mill kinds of business dealings, you shouldn't need constant piles of paper and contracts in order to protect yourself. It should be, if he cheats, he knows he's ruining his business, and therefore he has an incentive to always be honest when he deals with me, and I have an incentive to be honest with him, because if I cheat him, the next time I come to him to buy my wood, I'm not going to get any wood. And you had a built-in social apparatus for helping to reward honesty and to helping to punish cheating. Because we're in a more anonymous market system now, and anonymous market promotes deception. Because what's the penalty? What's the deceiver going to lose? Okay, Mishnah 6.
Mishnah 6, if a man deposited produce with his fellow, even if it should perish, he may not touch it. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel says, he may sell it before a court of law, since he is like someone who returns a lost object to its owners.
Okay, so we've dealt with all the lost object issues, right? You find a bushel of apples and you can't find the true owner for it, right? And it's not your property because it's a nice wrapped up bushel, so you know that it belongs to somebody and it's not hefker, it's not abandoned. You don't get to eat it. Points out, you can actually sell it in order to convert it to cash, because presumably the owner wants the value of the produce more than the specific apple that was sitting there in the bushel. And therefore, the cash is a ready way to return the lost value of the object rather than the object, produce being different than other objects. Well, if you are a guardian of an object, the question becomes a little bit less clear, right? Because I am watching over this bushel of apples, and I'm going to watch them until they rot, because that's all I was asked to do. And Rabbi Shimon is arguing, no, you should convert it to cash because you were hired, or you were asked to watch the value of the object, just like the guy who found the lost object. And that's what you should do.
But where is the limit? Like, you can wait until when? Because, for example, if you sell too fast, the person will be upset. If you sell too late, everything will be also trash.
You've already lost value. Right.
So where is the limit? How many days?
So that's where we would need to go into the Talmud, and where we would need to go into the later law codes. So we're not going to go down into that, because but you're right. Those are the perfect follow-up questions.
But I find the interesting.
What? Is somebody there?
Yeah, we do.
Okay.
But I find the interesting thing about that is that you don't just sell it. You sell it in front of a third party, a court of law, so that we, A, know how much you got for it, and
Right.
B, you don't give it away too cheaply.
Exactly, right. So that court of law is very, very important as a part here. So it's, look, you go to the court and you say, he left me this pile of apples to look after, but he's been gone for a week now, and these things are about to go bad. I think Frank is going to want the cash more than a bunch of rotten apples. So can I sell it for $50, $100? And the court would agree whether it was a fair price or not. And that would then save the value of the apples, even if not the apples themselves.
And then you would know what the price was, so I couldn't take $50 for it and then just give you $25. That's all I got.
Yeah, sorry, man, I sold the apples. It was a bad day on the apple market.
Yeah, that's what it was.
Well, Apple has been having trouble, isn't it,
Apple has
lately?
been having trouble, yes.
But the opinion is not by Rabban Shimon Gamliel.
No, I believe that the final opinion does not go according to him. Now, you can still put stipulations in the guardianship. So when I leave it with you, I can stipulate that should I not return within a week, you are authorized to sell it at fair market value and return the profit to me. But touching other people's properties when you've been told to look after them, which is what Mishnah 7 is going to go into more detail, that's a really, pardon the expression, touchy subject, right? Because when you're handling other people's stuff, it's tricky. Remember all the discussions we had about using objects that you'd found that you needed to return to the owner, the lost objects, of unrolling the scroll but don't read from it if you haven't already learned it, and all of those discussions. That's because other people's stuff is their stuff. and deriving benefit from it against their will or without their permission is a form of theft. So yeah, this too is a very touchy subject.
But I bet we're going to address the issue of if you're going to watch my apples,
Mhm.
don't I owe you a little bit of a fee for watching them? Should you just do it for free?
So
Is
that
there a
was
difference?
right before Thanksgiving. We
Yeah.
went in the 4 categories.
Yeah, there are.
And there are free guardians and paid guardians, and there
Okay.
are renters and there are borrowers. In this particular case, we're definitely talking about guardians, either somebody who is free or somebody who is paid. So if you're doing it for free, then no, you don't deserve a free
You don't
apple
get free
because you're doing it for free, unless the
Right.
guy says have it. And if you're being paid, so you don't deserve a free apple.
Okay, and that would have been taken care of in advance when you made the deal. You know
Exactly.
that. Okay.
So, but that caveat is really, really important. You do not get to self-decide that you deserve an apple because you are watching his apples. Right? It's not your place to say what's fair. How, as our sages say, the Yetzer Hara gets you, how the evil inclination works. Because it presents something as being totally reasonable that on the surface sounds reasonable, and yet is really leading you little by little towards the direction of theft and of satisfying what you want at the expense of someone else. And it doesn't just have to stop with apples, that eventually you justify all sorts of behaviors because you think it feels right and forget the other guy. So it begins with an apple. I think actually famously it began with an apple.
Yes.
Although technically,
Technically,
blow your mind,
Right.
the Garden of Eden story never mentions apples. Right? There is no mention of an apple in the whole first few chapters of the book of Genesis.
Fruit.
Just says fruit.
Just says
It just says fruit. In fact, there's a really long argument among the Midrashim in Bereshit Rabbah of what kind of fruit it was, of whether it was grapes or whether it was figs or whether it was pomegranate. Lots of different discussions of what kinds of fruit it might have been, or whether it was its own fruit altogether. But nowhere does it say apple in the Torah itself. That was a later artistic license that caught on. Like making fat babies angels.
They don't have apples in the Middle East, do they?
What?
Apples don't
No, there are definitely apples in that area because they're mentioned in other parts of the Tanakh, as in the phrase "apple of my eye." Good. I was a little bit of a linguistic aside. Mishnah 7.
Okay.
More about touching stuff.
Okay, here we have measurements that we may not really understand, kabin and kor, but okay. When a man leaves produce for his fellow, and his fellow returns it to the owner, he may exact reductions due to the natural depletion of the produce. For instance, for wheat and rice, he can deduct 9 half kabin to the kor. For barley and dura, 9 kabin to the kor. For spelt and linseed, 3 se'in to the kor.
All right. So what's going on here is not that the guardian just gets to take a little extra. There is a natural expectation that for these types of foods, however much you gave me, I am not going to give you back exactly the same amount. Let me give you an example. You go to the hardware store and you buy 80 pounds of concrete, and you drive to the construction site where you're going to deliver it, and you take that giant pile of concrete and you shovel it off the back of your truck onto the construction site. It's not the normal way to handle concrete, but you get the picture, right? If you weigh everything you put on the construction site, do you think it will be 80 pounds?
Probably not.
No.
Probably not.
Some of it's going to have been blown off. Some of it is going to be lost in the cracks at the bottom of the truck. Some of it, when you were shoveling it, is going to fly off the pile into the dirt or into the grass. The actual amount that is on the final construction site floor will be less than 80. And so too here. They're saying, look, it's just normal. If someone leads me a whole load of wheat, some of it is going to get nibbled by the mice. Some of it is going to be taken by the rats. Some of it is going to be just spoil in the bottom. Some is going to go through the cracks. Some of it will be lost in the wheat at the bottom of the floor. You know, the straw. If you've ever tried, I don't know if anybody here ever tried to actually do hay, like, you know, shovel hay, right? You've ever pulled apart a bale and then you have to put the hay in the hopper to feed the animals and such.
Mm-hmm.
Do you get every piece of hay? No, because once you pull that bale open and you're using the pitchfork, there's bits of hay everywhere. And imagine if you walked off the site, you know, from the stable, if the owner said, hey, that hay that's stuck in your hair and stuck to your back and scattered all over the dirt where you're walking. I want you to go back and pick up with tweezers every single. It would be unreasonable. And that's the principle here, is that there's a natural expectation that some of the stuff that was kept with you, this particular type of stuff, a little bit's going to disappear, and that we're not going to worry about.
And all this is in proportion to the quantity and according to the time that it is left.
Right? If you leave, 500,000 pounds of wheat and you leave it with me for a year, then more of it is going to be gone by the time I give it back to you than if you left me 5 pounds of wheat and came back a week. So we have to work out the math of what the reasonable loss will be.
Yeah. Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri said, but what do the mice care about the quantity? Won't they eat the same amount, whether there is a lot or a little?
Right? So that's all very well and good, but you're dealing with the laws of averages. I'm dealing with actual mice. And actual mice may ravage one storehouse, and they may leave the other storehouse relatively untouched. It must be that if the mice eat a bunch, you don't get a bunch back. And if the mice eat a little, you get more back than the measurements that are being discussed here. Right? I mean, it should be just the real amount. Right? Well, what would be the pushback on that position? Because again, on the surface, that seems quite reasonable. Well, what happens if someone says, oh yeah, terrible mice infestation, man. Like half your wheat gone. Really? And what about the definition of being a reliable guardian? The mice may not care, but me as a guardian, I should care about the mice. And if there's a big problem with the mice, then I better be doing something to protect what I'm guarding, or else I'm not being a proper guardian. Back and go, wow, look at those mice go. They're just eating through that stuff. Wow, Frank's going to be really upset. Oh, well, no, you should be engaged. And if you know there's a reasonable expectation of loss, but it's limited, you'll be a little bit more proactive in protecting someone else's stuff, which is what a guardian is supposed to do. However,
so the guardian may exact a reduction from only one cord, not from however much is there, but just from one small amount, one cord, right?
Right.
And Rabbi Judah says, if the quantity was great, he may not exact any reduction, since the produce increases in bulk.
All right, so this is a little bit of a head scratcher.
Yes.
2 ways to interpret this. One of them is that they're very bad at math, with the idea being that when you pile stuff up, there's always more than you thought there was when it's a lot. And there's something to be said for that. I know every time I go to tidy up the garage, there always seems to be more stuff in the garage than I thought there was. And there was a certain precedent for that in other parts of the Mishnah and the Talmud, where they say that before you count how much you've harvested in, you can still ask God for a blessing on the produce. Because once you've counted, it's fixed. But before you count, God still has room to help make it a little bit more. So there's a certain idea that the rabbis felt that large piles had the potential to surprise you with their quantity. The other explanation is that it's just the way you measure. When you measure small amounts, you are very, very exact. And therefore, you don't have to worry about rounding errors. But when you measure large quantities, you tend to overput the heap, the pile. And therefore, even if a little is gone, less taken than was added when you were over adding to the pile in the first place. Does that make sense? Right? When I added my pile of 100, I probably piled in 110. And then when the mice ate 10, we're back to 100, so we're fine. Makes sense? I mean, you can think for yourself. If you're, counting up pennies or something, chances are you're being a little bit more casual than when you're counting $100 bills. And you don't mind, but you'll probably put a few extra pennies in just to be sure rather than short it. But if it's a $100 bill, you're going to be a little bit more careful, making sure you have just the right amount. That's why there's the keep or take a penny, leave a penny thing. There's not the take a $100 bill, leave a $100 bill. I've gone to. All right, Mishnah 8.
With wine, he may exact a reduction of 1/6, but Rabbi Judah says 1/5.
So they have a different opinion about how much wine you lose over time.
He may exact of him 3 lubim in every 100 lugin of oil, 1 log and a half for sediment and 1 log and a half for absorption.
Right, so it's an interesting way of putting at it. Logs are not a huge amount, but the idea being that, you know, if you've got your clay pot, some of the wine is going to be absorbed into the clay, right? Because clay is porous. That's one of the issues with clay when it comes to kashrut. And the other issue is inside the wine, you have all of that lovely sediment. Remember, this is before modern purification and clarification agents and all those things. Over time, down to the bottom, which means the amount of wine you have left is less. I mean, it's not less because this was part of the wine when you started,
But it seems like.
but the usable wine that you get out of the jug is less than the wine you put into the jug. And the question then becomes, if I'm looking after it for you, am I on the hook for the fact that the wine amount seems to have gone down? And the answer is, not if it's this amount. Unless...
If the oil was refined, he may not exact for sediment.
Right? If you've gone through and you cleared it, you know, you put it through the cheesecloth or put it through your refining process to make sure that all the sediment was removed and all the little bits were removed, then there shouldn't be any muck at the bottom. Therefore, when you pour it out, you can't take off any quantity for sediment loss. You can still take off for absorption, but there shouldn't have been sediment to lose. So,
But if the jars were old, you can't take off for absorption.
because once the jars have been used over and over and over again, they're full. It's like a cast iron pan. Used it becomes seasoned with the oils of the previous foods, and now it's like a nonstick pan. And all those little holes have been filled with other bits of food. That's why cast iron pans, once you make it a meat pan, you're stuck. You're stuck. That's not ever going to, well, you can technically rekosher, but it's hard. Because it just absorbs too much. And clay, you can't rekosher at all for precisely this reason. Part 3?
Rabbi Judah says, also, if a man sells to his fellow throughout the year, the buyer must undertake to accept a reduction of 1 log and a half because of sediment.
Okay. So that even if it's going throughout the year, we can still add in the issue of sediment. So the issue when you're a farmer, I know this, again, like I said, not exactly terribly immediately relevant for us now. I'm trying to think of a parallel in the modern world where you're looking after something for somebody, but it's hard.
Yeah, we
Why
don't
am
do
I
that.
giving all this stuff to my neighbor to hold?
Oh, well, there's lots of
And
reasons.
going to Mexico on vacation or something?
So, for example, imagine your neighbor has a wine cellar. Right? They have a place to store barrels and barrels and barrels of wine, and you had a good year this year in your vineyard.
Okay.
So you've got more wine than you were expecting. You don't have enough room to sell or store it. He does. So you're going to roll some barrels down into his store. Now, you know, you're paying him for it. You can work that out. If he's doing it as a favor, you can work that out. But he's not going to be on the hook for a certain amount of loss from the wine or your olive presses that were producing this oil. So there were reasons why your neighbor would be looking after produce for you, other than just, I felt like going to Mexico. But nowadays, not a whole lot of reasons for why this would ever come about. You know, it's like the air in your car tires, the water in your swimming pool, maybe, but not a lot that would be of natural spoilage, because most of us don't deal with produce as being the main form of value that we have in our life. Most of us deal with cash or other assets as our main form of value.
Well, maybe coffee, Turkish coffee.
Yes.
That would be an example.
Yes. So there are, I guess, yes, there are some luxury produce items that we still have. Turkish coffee, rare teas, things that can still have an issue of spoilage of insects or those kinds of things. I imagine some people do still have very fancy wine cellars, and they wouldn't have to worry about bottles or sediment or absorption, presumably. Not too many clay containers for wine anymore. But I guess there are a few places that, usually with luxury items, where we might be concerned with a little bit of loss. Important. So a good example. Good thing I don't drink coffee. Okay.
This is interesting. I was going to ask you a question like this. I see we're addressing it. Okay.
Okay, Mishnah 9, you're.
If a man left a jar with his fellow to guard, and the owner did not assign it a special place to be kept, and the guardian moved it and broke it, it broke.
Okay, remember we're talking about touching people's stuff.
Mhm.
Now we're really going to get into touching my stuff. So let's make sure we understand the situation in part 1. Leaving my clay pot with Natan. And when I leave it with Natan, we don't agree that this is going to be on the top shelf in his garage. We don't say that. I just say, Natan, could you look after my pot? And he says, of course I could. So that is a agreement to watch, but not an agreement on the location of where the item is. Everyone, because you really got to know that, or else the rest of it's not going to make sense. So I didn't specify a location of where it needed to stay. Only thing that was clear was he had to watch it. Okay, now we get to the if.
Okay, so guardian, if it was broken while the guardian was handling it, if for his own sake he was touching it, he is liable. If he was touching it for the sake of the jar, he is not liable.
All right, so let's imagine. He puts it up on his top shelf, and for whatever reason, he decides that, you know what, I'm gonna put some lumber on the top shelf, and that means I need to move the jar, and I'll put it somewhere else. So he's moving the jar to get it out of the way to put up some lumber, and it breaks. On the other hand, if the jar is up there on that top shelf, and there's a rat infestation, and the rats are causing lots of trouble, and he's like, man, they're going to get into that jar, and it's going to be a big problem. Let me put this somewhere safer. And he drops it in that process, he's off the hook. He doesn't have to pay me for the loss of what he was protecting, because he got damaged while he was trying to protect it, not while he was just moving it. Make sense? Good. But
if it was broken after he had put it in place, whether he moved it for his own sake or for the sake of the jar, he is exempt.
Okay. But if it was broken after
He put it in place.
Right.
The first part is if he's broken while he was handling it, while he was trying to put it in its place, maybe?
Yes.
Okay, now once it's in place, he's not, then he's exempt.
Right. If it's actually in place and then it gets broken, then you're exempt because it was in place. Right? It was sitting where it was supposed to sit.
But it got broken when he moved it.
Yes.
Whether he moved it for his own sake or for the sake of the jar, for some reason he moved it
But after it had gotten that space.
after it was in the space.
Right.
Wow.
On the other hand,
On the other hand,
specification.
if the owner had assigned it a special place and the guardian moved it and it broke, whether or not it broke while he was handling it or after he had put it in its place, if he moved it for his own sake, he is liable, and if he moved it for the sake of the jar, he is not liable.
Okay, are we following the what's the term? The matrix here. I think they give a little bit of a little graph at the bottom there. Yes. All right. So let's see if we can't take care of this a little bit. There's actually, if I'm not mistaken, 2 more columns here to work through. So let's do with does not specify. Right, meaning that the owner did not specify where the jar is. This is part 1 of the Mishnah that we've got here, the first part. And then we're going to go ahead and how best to map this out. And then it's not set. Right, so the jar isn't set. And it's sake, not sake. Hold on a second. Hate making charts.
Wow.
Over here, not specified. The owner of the jar did not say where it had to go. The jar has not yet been put into its set place, its storage spot. I'm moving it as the caretaker initially to find the spot. Where am I going to put this? Where am I going to put this? If it's broken while I'm moving it for its sake, to make it safe, not liable. That says liable.
Yeah.
On the other hand, if I'm moving it for no good reason for the jar, but for my own selfish reasons, not selfish, but just for me, then I am liable. Make sense? On the other hand, if it is set, I found its place. It's right there. This is where it's going to rest. Period. Well, not period, because I have to move it for its sake or not its own sake. I am exempt in both cases. Because I did find a resting place for it, I have done my duty of storage, even though I needed to move it for some other reason, and therefore I am exempt. Okay. On the other hand, how we doing? And this pen is beginning to fade. Let me see if I can find another one. If that's nice and dark. If the owner specified where it's going to be, this is part 2 of the Mishnah. In both cases, let me see if I can make this work. In both cases, whether it's been set or not set, if it is for its sake or not its sake, right? That's what we're now dealing with. Then if it was moved for its own, I see what I should have done. I wrote this. Okay, so if it's moved for the sake of the jar, when he did specify, then it is not liable or exempt. And if it's not for its sake, then it is liable. I spell that right? Yeah. Okay.
I think this chart is reversed.
Well, it's using the term sake a little differently. So I'm using
the order.
Right, yeah, the order is also different. I'm going in the order of the Mishnah. It went in the order of liability. Yeah. So, and this does have some relevance in modern life because, you know, someone asks you to look after their chainsaw, or someone asks you to look after their car or something. This is sort of what will be implied. So if the owner says, all right, so we're going to park my car, or let's use motorcycle, right? Something that a neighbor might have you store. I'm going to park my motorcycle in your little car shed in the backyard. That's been agreed upon, that that's where my motorcycle is going to sit while I'm away. If I need to move the motorcycle because the car shed gets hit by a tree and the tree's going to crush it, and the motorcycle needs to get out of there for its own sake, and while I'm moving it, lightning hits it, I'm not responsible for that.
Or even as you're moving it, if you scratch it against the wall, you're not responsible.
Correct, as long as it's not negligence.
Right, it was just
Right.
accident because you're trying to move it fast.
Exactly. Again, in all these cases, you know, if I'm moving the jar and I'm juggling it, are off.
So when you say sake, is sake for your interest or the interest of the product?
Sake of item.
For the sake of the item.
It's for the sake of the item, yes. That's yeah, it's got to get that one word right for all the cases. On the other hand, if I told you and you agreed we're going to store it in your back little car shed, and you decide that you want to put your car in that shed, and so you're going to move my motorcycle into under the front porch or something, and it gets damaged in that process, you're liable, right? The issue here was whether or not it had finally reached its set place or not been into its set place, and there was more, what's the right word? There's more exemption. There's less liability if I didn't tell you where it had to be and something went wrong. But if we agree where it needed to be or where it should be and something went wrong, you have more liability under Jewish law. That may be the best short summary.
If we said park it in the garage,
Right.
on the street,
Right.
if during the move something happens, I'm liable. But this is saying, once I get it on the street and something happens, I'm not liable anymore?
Only if we didn't agree. If I say, look after my car, this is category 1.
Okay, not liable. So they're not liable if broken after being put in place.
That's
only for that.
That's only for the category where we had not specified where its place was.
Okay.
Right. So if I say, look after my car, and you say, sure, 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 and you first think driveway, first think, you know, car, garage, or on the street, when you move it into the place where it's supposed to be kept and it gets damaged, you're exempt, right? Because you've moved it. But if you're moving it around and you haven't actually got a place for it to be kept, and something happens, you're liable if you're not doing it for its own sake. So in general, as you can see, I don't know whether I can do this visually. You're only liable in these two cases. Most of the time, moving stuff around, you're generally exempt because it's expected that there's going to be some movement in many of these cases. And as long as you're not being stupid about it, you shouldn't be held responsible if something surprising happens. But on the other hand, the more things have been agreed upon, the more you are clear of what should be done, where it is, the documentation, the record keeping, all of that good stuff, then liability increases.
So the general rule that I see is that if someone gives you something, okay, whatever you do for the option, to conserve the option, you are not liable. Okay, because for your benefits with the option, you are liable.
Right.
That's a very easy way to generalize.
No, they're except for this last category. If it has been
for
set,
every rule, there is exceptions.
yes. Yashikoch, exactly. So in the last category where it's been set and you need to move it for some other reason, as long as you had found its place, that final movement, you were still exempt. Right? Because you had done your due diligence to get it in place. In our translation, it's part 1, part A, part 2. Oh, sorry, no, part 1, part B. In either case, he is exempt. Clear? Okay. Do we have time for 10? 10 is kind of short. Yeah, let's hit 10. We started a bit late, so we can get 10.
If a man left money in his fellow's keeping, and his fellow bound it up and hung it over his back, or delivered it to his son or his daughter who were minors, or locked it up improperly, he is liable since he did not guard it in the way of guardians. But if he guarded it in the way of guardians, he is exempt.
All right. So this is just well, it's a general good statement, but the question becomes, how much do you have to guard? Ask you to look after money, and you lock it up in a safe, and you put the safe in the ground, and you have a guard outside, and someone comes and kills the guard, breaks open the safe, and steals the money. Are you liable?
No.
No, you did exactly or even more than a guardian would be expected to do. On the other hand, if you take the money and you just got it, over your back, or hanging out of your back pocket, or you give it to your kids and say, hey, look at these gold coins, go play with them, and they get lost or they get stolen, careless. And being careless with other people's stuff, that's the definition of being liable for what happens to it. And that's the case even if you are an unpaid guardian, even if you're doing it for free. If you are being negligent, not just you didn't go to the nth degree, but negligent, then you are responsible for what happens to the stuff.
Right.
That seems, I think, fairly self-explanatory, pretty reasonable.
Yes, it's very reasonable. In fact, you don't even have to go as far as you said with burying the safe in the ground. If you took the money, put it in a drawer, and even locked the drawer,
right,
it's enough.
Specify more, and if they specify more, then you have to do what was specified.
Right.
That's where you agree.
But that would be ordinary care.
Right.
That would be okay.
And that idea, in general, of what is the ordinary expectation, it becomes a very common theme in many applications of Jewish law. Right? Well, what would a reasonable expectation of ... be? And what's a reasonable expectation of looking after someone's money? Like, I didn't just leave it sitting on the coffee table. That would not have been very good guardianship of someone else's money.
Our legal system is based on a reasonable man theory.
Absolutely, yes. Exactly right. And there's a reason for that.
Right, the bailment for hire.
Right.
Yeah.
speaking, it's impossible to write laws that will cover every possible permutation. I mean, how could they write a law of what it meant to reasonably lock something up?
Right.
I mean, the technology between their locking up and our locking up has changed radically. So if they said, oh, locking it up means having it under one key, that might be laughable to us now. But instead, to say that it's a reasonable element of guardianship, that is an adaptable and continually living form of law that we can apply in any generation.
If you put, also if you put in a room, okay, the money with the locker, okay?
Right.
That's fine, okay, but what if you forget to lock the door?
So then you didn't lock
Are
it.
you liable?
Yes.
You're liable.
If you
Normally
didn't-
that originally you said in a place that has locker and everything, but if you forget,
Putting valuables in a safe and not locking the safe is not putting them in a safe. It's putting them in a box.
accidents happen.
They do.
Forget.
They do, and that's the point here, is that accidents will happen, and if it's a negligence that you could have easily prevented by avoiding that accident, then you're responsible. But if it's an accident that a reasonable person would not have been able to foresee or prevent, then you're not responsible. So if you put the money in that safe and you lock it up and a tornado comes, you're not on the hook for that. Nobody expects you to prevent tornadoes. But on the other hand, if you put it in the room and you should have locked the door and you just were so busy that you forgot. There's no tornado causing you to forget. It was your fault.
You know what's the problem they have with all this that we learned today?
Mhm.
It's that from my perspective, okay?
You don't want to touch other people's stuff.
I try to make you a favor, okay?
Right.
And sometimes you make mistakes,
Right.
but I try to be nice with you, make a favor. And if I'm liable, okay, for something, for an accident,
Right.
when I try to make you a favor, what I learned from here, I don't make any favor. Sorry, it's your problem. Don't ask me, because in this way I cover myself.
Okay.
So that's the problem that they have with everything what they learned today.
So there's a couple different ways to answer that. So one of them is, this is dealing with the exceptional cases, right? A reasonable person, to go back to our legal theory, a reasonable person would know that they should lock the door if they're putting money for safekeeping inside of it. If you don't lock the door,
You forget.
I know, but you weren't doing me a favor. Right? You didn't help me by being careless with my possession. You may have thought you were doing me a favor, but it was your carelessness that cost me the money. If you were not up to the task of locking a door, you should not have agreed to look after my money, and I could have found someone else who would.
And what if I lose also my money? Like I have my money with yours,
Right?
and I forget. So it's not like intentionally, oh, I
Right.
recognize with your money. Also,
Right.
I lost my money because you know what? I forget.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
So also liable for
Yes.
that? Yes.
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 So that's
Okay.
my problem. You see,
Right.
that's really my problem.
But if you're not an obsessive compulsive person who really will take care of my stuff,
No, you don't need
please
to be.
don't take it.
You don't need to be OCD.
No, you don't need to
Right.
quite that.
You
But I want
just
to know
need, and the
not
part,
careless.
right? The part that's very important on this is you need to treat other people's stuff even better than you would treat your own. And that's part of what it means to have respect for other people's property. And yes, you're doing me a favor, but you're not doing me a favor if you're not willing to treat my things with respect.
That's right.
And I appreciate that. It's like, let's say I'm going to do you a favor. I'm going to come trim your trees. I'm not going to ask you. I'm just going to come to your house with a chainsaw next Sunday, and I'm going to trim your trees. And if one of the branches falls and breaks a window, hey, I was just helping you,
Right.
right? Why are you mad at me? I was just trying to be nice.
And by the way, I'm not a very
If
good
I wanna-
tree trimmer.
Right, if I want to
anyway.
wash your car and I show up and I'm washing your car and I scratch it all up, I was being nice. Why are you
You know
upset?
what? My conclusion is that's me. I don't
Don't do favors.
Don't do favors.
Don't do me any
So,
favors.
Go on yourself, feel bad. Don't
Okay.
do favor. Thank you so much. Good luck. Find someone else.
But hold on,
So in
Natan.
this way,
How
I'm more
many-
safe.
How many
Yes.
times have we seen
Yes.
exempt?
Yes.
The minimum that the mice might have eaten, you're exempt from. The amount that was absorbed, you're exempt from. The reasonable breakage that someone might have stolen it, you're exempt from. It's only if you were unreasonably negligent that you're on the hook. By my definition, protecting the person guarding from excessive obligation, free. And if you're not willing to accept that risk, then you're right. You shouldn't watch my stuff.
That's right.
And that helps me too.
Yes.
Right? If I know you won't watch my stuff because you can't guarantee that you'll lock the door, then you know what? I'm better. I'm happier
That's right.
not giving you my stuff to watch.
Find somebody else.
We both win.
Really, accidents happen. It's not that I don't like you.
No, it has nothing to
Okay,
do-
but it's
It's
not
It's not accidents.
It has nothing to do with that.
Okay, so hold on. This is a pet peeve, right? This is a pet peeve. When somebody is driving down the road at 50 miles an hour when it should be 25, and they're texting, and they're drinking a beer, and they hit your car. Is that an accident?
No.
No, that's negligence.
Yeah.
I just happen to be drinking the beer. What, you gonna blame me for that?
Right.
No,
We
but I
use-
didn't ask you a favor. Hey,
Ah.
can you bring me a drink with me a beer?
But I didn't mean
Okay.
to. I didn't mean to. Accidents happen. You know, it's just what happened.
And it happened to me like the other day, someone touched me from behind.
Mhm.
I was an accident for the lady. The lady started to cry.
Right.
Nothing happened to my car.
Right.
And I said, nothing happened to my car. It was an
And that's
accident.
fine. Yeah,
Yes.
no damage,
Fine.
of course.
But the favor you
But-
are asking when you're on the road is for other people to drive safely. That is the favor you're asking.
My point is that the term, when you say accidents happen, and I don't want to be responsible, the only accidents the Mishnah is leaving us on the hook for, we should have been able to prevent. It's not telling us be afraid of tornadoes. It's not telling us be afraid of, the random Batman thief.
Right.
It's telling us lock the door, don't let your kids play with it. If I ask you to look after my iPad and you hand it to your kids, well, not your kids, they're old enough, but imagine if you had little kids, and they're playing with it and they break it. Shouldn't you be responsible?
Sure.
Yes, true. But you got
And the solution is not, I won't look after your iPad. The solution is, I'll put your iPad on the top shelf away from my little kids. Fine.
I understand, but your example of the cars also, it's not a good example because something is when you have something that you can control, something is not. Like in the case of I give you a favor, I control my action. In the case of someone driving a car, it's nothing
No,
wrong.
Natan,
Me, I
Natan.
don't
No.
invite a person.
You
to
hang it
car.
over your back. You give it to your children, who are the minor children. You lock it up improperly. You don't have control over those?
Yeah.
I mean, those are precisely things that are in your control.
Totally.
I mean, that the Mishnah is on your side. That accidents that are true accidents, you're not responsible for. Unless, by the way, you're a borrower, set of responsibility. But for guardians, true accidents that there is no way to predict and no reasonable person would have been able to prevent it, you are never on the hook for those. Even if you were hired as a guardian. But things that are your deliberate acts of negligence, whether it's forgetfulness or whether it's just a bad idea, if everybody knows that that is a bad idea or you just forgot because why else would you not have done it, then yeah, you're responsible.
Right. If I asked you to watch my motorcycle and you put it in the place where we set it in the carport,
Yeah.
and then one day you said, "Oh, that's such a great motor. I'm gonna take it out for a spin." Any accident is
Bam,
that's
you're on
right.
you're on the hook.
Even though you didn't mean for somebody to hit you,
Of course you
it
didn't.
doesn't matter.
If you go into the demolition and derby, then you're more on the hook. But
Oh, I saw that one of them. Oh my gosh, those are crazy.
yes, they are. All right, so we'll leave it there for tonight.
Okay.
Okay.
Wow.
Don't touch my stuff.
Good stuff. Yeah.